Hey there, welcome to the Game Artist Podcast. My name is Ryan Kingsline. I am the founder of Vertex School, where we train creatives for the career of their lives. In this podcast, we interview amazing creatives to see what makes them tick and see how they got where they are today. So sit back, relax. I look forward to sharing their journey with you. All right, well, let's jump into it. So I want to welcome you, Lana like banana.
That's it.
Thank you. So sorry, I'm a dyslexic, and you had to make that hard. So thank you for that. But you did make the last part easier for me. It's Bachynski. So I'm glad to have you here in this kind of animator series as we go through this. And I have Dan Perry here with me, who is the head of our animation department, and excited for us to kind of dive in and start talking about, animation, the craft, and see if we can, as I was saying, get to some of that kind of secret math that helps people get those jobs, because that's what we're really focused on here at Vertex. Mm-hmm. And like I said before, you have to excuse me if you hear kids, during COVID, it's just crazy here. Yeah. All right, so why don't we start with a bit of an introduction, and you tell me, who you are, what you do right now, and I've looked in your past and all that stuff, so we'll dive into that. But what do you do now?
Sure. My name is Lana Bachynski, as you mentioned, and I'm presently a senior animator at Riot Games in Santa Monica. I'm working on the skins team for League of Legends, so we're doing a bunch of cool sort of cosmetic items and animations for the champions in Runeterra. Most recently, we released a very cool event called the Spirit Blossom event, and I was responsible for being senior animator on the two legendary skins that were released. That is Spirit Blossom Thresh and Spirit Blossom Ari, if you want to check those out. That's who I am right now.
Awesome. What did you do? No, I'm trying to figure out how I unpack this. So you're at Riot right now. Before Riot, you were at Blizzard.
Yes.
And you were at Blizzard for, I think, about a good 4 years, right?
5.5 years, actually.
5.5.
Yes.
Great. And if I remember correctly from your bio when I was looking at that, you had another job right before Blizzard, or I think, wasn't Blizzard one of your first animation jobs?
Blizzard was my first job. I got an internship with them in university back in 2012. Mm-hmm. I was fortunate enough to be an intern for the StarCraft team, or Team 1 at Blizzard. And at the time, I worked a little bit on what was called Blizzard All-Stars, eventually turned into Here's the Storm, which is the game I got hired back full-time after university. So I did the internship, and then I had another year left to go, finish the degree. And it's a longer story. And then I did a year of freelance illustration, which was weird but fun. And then Blizzard called me back as soon as they were able.
And that was about 2.5 years, yeah?
Between internship and starting full time?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like 2 years. I think a little under 2 years is how much time it would be. It felt like an eternity because I'm Canadian, and I was like waiting from that OPT. My visa is going to expire. I'm like, Blizzard, call me. I need it. And it was, they eventually my old boss sent me a text, very obscure, one night at like 8:30. It's not like we kept up. So he just texted me, hey, very mysterious. And I was like, what's up? And he's like, one sec, I have a phone call. And then I waited for like an hour, and he said, I'm just kidding. Do you want to come back to Orange County? And I said, only if there was a job there. And so then I got a job. Yay. Offer was in the mail. Very, very fun.
Wait, did he really wait like a half hour?
He waited like a half hour, and he was like, just kidding, there wasn't even a call, I just wanted you to sweat. We were on really good terms, and making it sound very cruel. It was a hilarious joke. But I did just sit there and stare at my phone for like an hour.
What did it feel like when you got that? Because, I mean, that's like a dream job right out of school.
Oh, it was a
right out of school, but right away.
Yeah, it was basically right out of school. It felt right out of school because I got so close with the team during my internship. So even though I wasn't in touch with my boss, I was in touch with a lot of other people. We sort of always kept up. It felt like a dream for so many reasons. Probably the greatest of which is like I said I was gonna. That's the reason I became an animator was Blizzard. I said I was gonna be I wanted to work for Blizzard for the first time when I was maybe 12. And then all through university, I had said, oh, I want to work for Blizzard. And then at the time, I don't know what the vibe is like in universities now, but at the time there's a lot of the cool kids who were like, oh, you want to make video games? And they're really sassy about it. And I was like, that'd be so weird, right? But then I never lost sight of that dream. Somebody linked me as soon as they had an animation intern available. Somebody linked me their careers page. I applied online, and it was like 4 months later I heard from them. And yeah, just being able to say, "Oh, I work here full time," is literally for me childhood dream.
Mm. What about you, Dan? What was your first, like, your dream ambition on that?
So I actually started off differently. When I was younger, I had loved video games and I wanted to get into video games, but I came from a really tiny area, which we didn't really talk a lot about video games. Like, I mean, I grew up on farms and things along those lines. So when I first was getting off, I was just like, I know I want to work with computers because computers are like what I play my video games on. So I want to get into computers. I ended up getting into computer engineering, working for the government for a while. Didn't really enjoy what I was doing and decided to go back to school while I was working full time. And then as soon as I got out of that, I had a job very quickly after graduating and started working for Vertex Games.
Cool. What got the impetus, though? Because what I'm interested in here, and one of the things I wanted to get to is, so you had that drive at 12. Were you playing video games at 12?
Yes, I was. Sorry, I was just unmuting myself there. I was playing video games at 12. I wasn't allowed to. It's not that I wasn't allowed. We didn't own any consoles, so I was big into computer games. And I mean, in the PC sphere, Blizzard games are huge. StarCraft, Warcraft, 2, Tides of Darkness, I played endlessly. And I just knew that I wanted to be a part of that. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't understand that animation was something I could do as a career until I was in high school. And then I was very fortunate that I actually attended an arts school in Edmonton, Alberta, where I'm from, Victoria Composite School of the Arts. And they had an introduction to animation. And my animation teacher sort of saw that I was very invested. I thought it was like this weird hobby that I did because I was like, cool, sure, I'll hang out here all the time, like the chess club. I was like, the animation club, but it's just me.
Yeah.
And my teachers, Dave DeBercier, if he ever hears anything I do again, he like pointed to all like the posters that he had on his wall of like he had all the movie posters that he'd gotten from the movie theater when they were done with them. There was like A Bug's Life and Incredibles, and there was one for Warcraft 3, and he sort of went, people get paid to make those. And then I was like, oh, well, I could get paid to make those. And, with his help and a couple of the teachers, sort of started putting together a portfolio, applying for universities. And I ended up applying for a university in San Francisco because I knew there was a lot of industry in that area. And so I was like, even if this school is bad, there will probably be enough animation education around that I could just go be a part of. So that was my big plan. And yeah. So things sort of fell into place over time, but the understanding that animation was a career, the understanding that basically anything that I could possibly be excited about, there's probably a way to do it professionally, it's weird how that doesn't just click into place. But when it did, that is no turning back.
That's great.
It's really funny you say it like that because I felt the same exact way. Like I was mentioning, growing up in this small little town, and I knew that I liked video games, but I never really thought of it as a kid. Like, oh well, I can actually go and make video games. I can actually do something with the skill that I have and the love that I have for the games, and actually apply it to making games. I don't know as a young kid why I thought that way, but it wasn't until well after college and going to working for the government and stuff that I finally started playing around in 3D worlds, and then I was like, I want to make this stuff move. And then as soon as I started making stuff move, it clicked to me like, I enjoy this way too much to just do this for like an hour a night or so at home. So I got to figure out a way to do this more. Started just doing it more on my own, and then eventually I don't know if you guys know the website DeviantArt. I started posting stuff on DeviantArt. And then I won a daily deviation, and then that ended up getting me like a little phone interview with somebody just talking about games. And how I won the daily deviation and stuff. And I was like, oh, well, I just play around at home. And they mentioned, hey, well, why don't you try going to school for it? And next thing you know, I'm going back to school and getting a whole new career. So it's funny how life can direct you in different directions like that.
Yeah, we had an artist at Blizzard who was just posting on DeviantArt, like fan art of StarCraft, and eventually Blizzard had reached out to them and were like, "Do you want to just do that for us?" And he was like, "Okay." It's amazing, like
right?
like showing the world what you're creating, which as artists I know can be such a vulnerable experience because there's some troll out there that's gonna be like, "This looks like garbage," and you'd be like, "I feel like garbage," but like there's also so many opportunities and so much growth that can come from just engaging with a community like that. I love hearing that kind of story.
That's cool.
Well, I want to dive into a question because we were talking about like this people wanting to do this and this love of it, right? And I didn't come in from the animation side. I came in from the sculpting side, and that just I don't even know how that's stuck. Like it's so weird. Sculpting naked people is actually like a job. That's a weird job, but it is a job. But one of the things that I think's kind of come up over in the next I don't know, 10 years, I think, is one, this is a job and it actually pays really well. Like when I was doing this for a living, I made a lot more than my father made. And, I graduated from college, but, it wasn't the college that got me a job. I was actually, my degree's in creative writing as a poet, of all things. And that didn't get me a job in CG at all. But the skills did. So the question I got for you, and specifically for you because of the way your career charted is, what was it about your portfolio that really caught their attention? So if somebody was looking at this and they wanted to get that job at Blizzard, you had some magic in your portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
What was it? Do you know? Can you look back and look at it now and be like, this is
what
worked?
I know very explicitly because I was very, maybe you could say astute, hopefully never annoying, but that's the kind of question. Maybe vain. I'm like, why did you like me so much? That's the kind of question that I asked up front. Like, I want to know, especially as an intern. I don't know if I'm going to get hired from this. Why did you like me so that I can go somewhere else? And I think there's magic in two parts. When it comes to my portfolio, the thing that I was explicitly told was why I got the job is that my portfolio didn't look like everyone else's. And I know in a market where everything is like super flooded with so much talent out there, it's hard to make your portfolio not look like everyone else's. But for games specifically, I think there's still this idea that, I'm applying for a job in games, time to start doing some walk cycles, like time to start doing like just a bunch of cycles. So every reel that they would get in would be a whole bunch of different cycles of different characters. But my reel, I threw a cycle in there because I just wanted to show that I could do that if they cared. But I just showed off my most solid pieces of animation, and that's what mattered. And so the fact that I didn't have like a preconceived idea what this job might be and tried to represent that in my reel, I just put my best stuff in there, showed to the team. Because already I stood apart by just trying to reflect me and not reflect the company back at themselves. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of the times as a student, you want to show that you can do what they can do, but I think you want to show them that you can do what they're not doing yet. Like the exciting thing about you is what you can bring to the team that's not necessarily a flavor they already have. I guess it's also magic in three parts, because the second part about it is certainly my what they call soft skills, which is definitely a term I didn't hear until I was in the collaborative working world, but my ability to talk to people, to express not only like thoughts and opinions on a given subject, but being able to verbalize what was happening in my own work. And general, I guess, demeanor really helped. They thought that I was a good culture fit for the team. They thought that my vibe would gel well with their vibe. And keeping in mind that an interview is I thought it was as much for me as it was for the company. So as much as I wanted to show that the company that I was who they wanted me to be, I also was wary in certain ways. You know, everybody's heard rumors about certain like bad practices in the industry. So it's like, well, what does your work-life balance look like? I ask questions like what programs you're using, what kinds of things will I learn? And like just the fact that I asked questions in the interview was a big factor to why they wanted to hire me, because I seemed engaged and sort of studious on the subjects that they were willing to teach. And then finally, the third part of the magic was certainly a huge chunk of luck. I think that's like a very underrated thing in the industry. For me, my boss explicitly told me at the end of my internship that it was down to me and one other candidate, and they were going to pick the other candidate because they already had more experience. Their reel was actually a little bit more something that they were excited about. But he made an embarrassing joke to the candidate and was too embarrassed about it, so they hired me instead.
Wow.
He told me that. And I'm like not mad because I still beat out like 8,000 other people for the job.
Yeah.
So I know that I deserved to be there. And in the way that my career progressed through Blizzard, I knew I deserved to be there. But also, man, like eating that humble pie, like, it's good. Oh, it's so good. So like something to keep in mind at any time and any of the, like in between like finishing school and when Blizzard finally called me, I didn't sit around. I applied to jobs endlessly and got a million rejections. But being able to understand that there's possibly just a bit of luck involved, and you have to be there at the right time. You have to make sure that they didn't accidentally say a bad joke to you or like whatever it is. Like you don't know behind the scenes. So not taking that stuff to heart and not giving up and just being positive about it. It's exciting. We make games. Like I think there's gotta be fun involved. And even in the interview process, I think there should be a bit of fun involved too.
What do you mean your portfolio didn't look like everyone else? Does that mean, I understand it's not walk cycles, but did that mean that you had like character scenes, you had lip sync, you had, emote, mime? What is it that you had?
I can tell you what I have, and I will say that I have other recommendations for people who are looking to make a reel now, as somebody who's been on the other side of it for a while now. What I had was like a lip sync. I had a big creature animation piece, 2 different creatures. I had like a dragon, like a fantasy creature that you might see, some dog interaction, dog behavior stuff. I had people dancing, showing characters interacting and touching was like a big thing I studied in school a lot, like realistic. I ended up doing that much in the games that I've been making for the last couple of years, but that was like a big thing to try and nail down, was this idea that they actually touch. And then I threw in like a crazy creature cycle. We had like this 6-legged crabfish monster, and I just wanted to show a bigger monster. So it wasn't just a walk cycle. I was like, I'll do a simple animation of a cycle, but with a crazy looking thing. It's like, whoa, what's that thing? You made all those legs move? Great. So that was sort of, I tried to sort of hit all of the bases of things I felt like I was good at.
Yeah.
So that's what my reel looked different. It wasn't just walk cycle, guy with gun, walk cycle, guy without gun, walk cycle, sexy lady. It was the sort of an arc of a bunch of different stuff that they might like to see.
I get it. What's your recommendations now?
My recommendations now are, well, I guess to some extent it is that, and put your best stuff in there. Definitely put your best stuff in there for show. Doesn't matter what it is. If your best stuff is the dialogue, throw it in there. It shows that you know the principles in animation, but it would be to some degree tailoring for a company. Like for me, I was like, here's my hanky reel, and I threw it at everybody. But that, for like a lot of studios who were doing mocap, that's worthless. So my recommendation now is, if you feel like you're at a place where you have sort of nice buckets of animation, it's so easy to make a free blog somewhere and say, here's my face animation stuff. Here's my physical animation stuff. And as somebody who goes through people's reels, I'll check all the videos. I'll watch a little bit of each one. I know there's all those stories of like, they watch 10 seconds and then they throw it in the garbage. But from my perspective, that's not quite how it goes. There's definitely, here's my page, here's the different buckets of things I'm good at, and sort of having larger buckets of things to check out. And then if you want like a demo reel that has it all, just for ease, do that too. But something where we can access it all. Not all of it. Definitely keep it to your best stuff. But if you feel like you have a lot of stuff, then don't be afraid to show it off.
Normally, when I interview game artists, and this is something Dan and I have been working a lot on, we try to find kind of the triggers, right? Because we hear a lot, both in game arts, animation, and a couple of other things, like portfolio matters, right? And you got to put your work out there. But one of the things I've noticed with students is they don't always know what best work is, right? And I remember my painting teacher, Al Gurry, he used to tell me that one of his biggest jobs was stopping the students before they screwed up, right? So he would literally like run around the studio and he'd be like, done, move, done. And he would just like be like, don't touch that again. And have us start something over, at the same time. So I want to kind of unpack what it means, what best work means. And of course I know it means like, it's the best that you can do. But, are there certain triggers or certain things that when you're looking at work, and we can look at it in the positive or the negative. Why don't we start with try the negative. Like, are there certain things when you see it, you're like, amateur, professional, or this person has it or this person doesn't have it? And I'll give you an example. I know it's not nice to look in the negative, but I can always tell where people are in anatomy for sculpting, and all I have to do is I look at their elbows. If their elbows and their brachioradialis isn't really done that well, I'm like, I know where you are, right? You probably have these awesome pectoralis muscles, you get all that stuff, and then everything goes to hell in the small parts. And I went through the same journey, so I get it. But are there anything like that with animation where you're like, these are triggers that say this person's not ready yet? Does it make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. I think it varies depending on the role. So if I'm looking at an associate level, which I think, for students, that's the level of role that you'll be playing for. So I'll talk about that one. But the thing that says that you're not ready, to me, is often having things in there that are very vanilla. And if it's just like it's the base flavor, it's the first level. Like you've got a walk cycle in there. It might be polished beautifully, but it's it's as realistic as it can be. It's just a walk cycle. Like there's not much else there. If you're going to have a walk cycle, who is this character? Like I think something that people don't think about a lot with video game animation is there's a lot of thought into who the characters are, even in their walk cycle, even especially with in the MOBAs I've worked on. So League of Legends and Heroes of the Storm, like character is a huge, even StarCraft, thinking about like, okay, what is this roach? And my brain would always be like, what I'm working on, I'm like, okay, it's kind of sneaky, but it's not actually sneaky, but it thinks it is. And like the dialogue that you're having with yourself and the subtext of who each character is should be sort of oozing out of every facet of the character, even if we never see any lore for them. We don't know the fantasy. We should get a glimpse of that in what you're working on. So if I'm seeing things that are just very vanilla, that's sort of one take. But even then, like refined animation, that's not the worst. The other thing is when things are sort of vanilla by way of texture and flavor. There's not a lot of texture, visual texture to the motions. Everything is very evenly timed. You'll get like, okay, I'm going to punch, punch, kick, like put on a metronome and you could feel every hit of every animation. But that's something that needs to be worked on. I don't even necessarily know if that's what I would say you're not ready. But there are things that I look out for that if somebody also does a punch, punch, kick, but they're going punch, punch, kick, I'm leaning towards the one that felt more dynamic in that way, rather than I'm finding my motion is polished, but I haven't found who this is yet. I think that's the difference between more amateur and somebody who knows is getting it a little bit more, because they're not working on the rudimentary principles. They're working on how to zazz it up, how to make it theirs. Does that make sense, Dan? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, perfect sense. Yes, it makes sense. Sorry, I try not to interject while you're talking, but yeah, it makes absolute perfect sense. And I've spent a lot of time looking at thousands of reels and such, and it does make a lot of sense. Whereas sometimes you can't always put words behind what you're trying to say. But yeah, texture of it and timing of it of pieces is certainly important. And yeah, vanilla. That is a tough one because when you see like a vanilla walk cycle, I mean, and certainly as an animation school, we're going to be teaching how to do a vanilla walk cycle because it's you got to start there. It's certainly not generally something you're going to want to put on your demo reel because it's like you're saying, what's the next step? Okay, well now this is a character. Add some character, add some personality. What is so special about that particular character that makes them want to get from A to B? Why are they walking from there to there? And their internal thought processes, which is essentially the animator's thought processes, can really be shown. Yeah, absolutely makes sense.
Word.
Dan, you talk in some of those videos because texture is a new word for me, and I have a feeling like with animation, there's a lot of stuff like that where it's like there's not a lot of like you just have to use what words are available. So texture probably refers to. I kind of want to dive into what texture refers to and what that means, because it feels like that there's some language there. And Dan, you talk a lot in some of the support lectures about offsets and timing. And I don't know, does it fit into those? Like if we were to bring some of that down into the 12 stages or 12 principles of animation.
This one would, I think this one would be appeal. Would pretty much would be where that one would sit. So basically, as Lana's saying, let's take it to something super easy like a walk cycle. Standard walk cycle is approximately 1 second long for someone to make 2 full steps. And if it's at exactly that, and then your middle step is at half a second, and then your next whole part of that cycle feels exactly the same. It feels like ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. And as she said, like what do they call it, metronome, where it's just like you can feel the timing of it exact at all times. Where if you put a little bit of personality on it, maybe they hop a little bit on one step, it gives it a little bit more texture. In an attack, maybe the person is, while they're attacking, all of a sudden they have a small thought process go through their head and there's a slight pause in their attack. Maybe they switch hands with their sword in the middle of their attack or something along those lines. It's not just a normal, like as she put it, very, very well. It doesn't feel like, okay, every 15 frames, you're going to feel a hit. Every 15 frames, there's going to be a beat. Instead, it's got these pauses and moves. Stylized animation, if you think about like the really stylized, almost cartoony animation where you'll have characters move from one spot to another spot in like a split second, and they do what they call smear screen, where the character is just literally their face is blown apart by how fast they're moving from one frame to the next frame, and then all of a sudden they come stiff and they stop and then they deliver a piece and then they're like kind of jetting to another spot. It's these texture pieces of like, okay, there's a little bit of slowness here, and then, oh my goodness, there's a lot of fast there, and those fast and slows don't come exact either. If that makes sense. I'm trying to help describe it.
It's difficult because it is something that you have to like have a sort of a visual aid with you to be like, this feels like it's got more texture to it and this doesn't. I think animation, I have my good buddy Brandon Nason and he always says that animation, we talk about animation almost exclusively with onomatopoeia. So if the only onomatopoeia that I have is like bounce, 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 like that's gonna be a boring animation or like a boring song. But if I'm like biddly zap zow, that's like if I pulled that audio in and I did an animation to a biddly zap zow, that's gonna be a more exciting animation than bop, 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 bop. Like if you listen to a song that was like that, one of them you'd be like, that song is boring. And if you have a song that is like, when you have like those songs that like every once in a while they have like that hold and all the music stops and then they not like dropping the beat, but like they do it in rock songs a lot where like it'll be like the same verse that just happened, but they'll have a pause and everything stops and then they come in on the offbeat and it feels really exciting and maybe there's a key change in that moment, like who knows, but there's something exciting happening there. And the same thing is sort of happening with animation. At Riot, we definitely we strive for that a lot, specifically in our recall animations. So we try and balance moments of rest and like held poses with moments of dynamic action, and the marriage of those two things and how you space them out and where creates the texture that you see within the piece.
I want to play a little devil's advocate though, because in a game, aren't they animating walk cycles where a character's just running through metronome style through a game?
I mean, metronome style, perhaps if you're just looking at the footfalls, and you could find the footfalls are landing because you need them to be on the ground for a certain amount of time. But are they landing footfall? And is the time that it takes for the foot to be on the ground and the time it takes for the foot to get back to the front the same? Because you can have a run cycle that's like super, super fast where the foot is like pushing off the ground, but then they're in the air, zap, zap. And it feels not like boring, like I'm walking, and it takes the same exact same amount of time for my hands to get to the front, to go to the back. It's like it's got held and it's held and it's held, but there's like this quick moment in between them. Or you can have like, okay, your feet are just walking, but your hand is doing something sassy up here. Like depending on how you're adding things in, like you can create texture within something that is just cyclical by adding character and offsetting the way things are hitting. Like I don't want my feet and my hands to hit at the exact same moment. I'm moving my feet under my desk. It looks worse. If you saw my whole body, it would be sillier. But really, it's like my foot hits and then my arms following through, and then my foot hits and my arms falling through. Even if you were doing a vanilla walk cycle, there's more texture there than if every part of the body is hitting at the exact same time, and then you feel more robotic.
We have a thing we talk about at Vertex where getting the job is different than doing the job. And I don't know how accurate that is for animation, but for game arts, I know people that get jobs just showing key shot renders and non-game topology and just beautiful stuff. And they're basically fishing, and they're just putting something beautiful out there. And then somebody says, "Oh, well, we want to do a game version. We'll hire you for a game version," right? But does that make sense with this too, where it's getting the job is different than doing it, and the tasks you'll be doing it, or no?
I think possibly by way of speed.
Mm-hmm.
Like I could show some beautiful animation pieces, and the thing about a reel is like I don't know how long that took you. Like maybe
Right.
it took you 14 weeks, and we don't have 14 weeks to give you to do a single animation piece. You got 1 week.
Right.
So that's a lot of the time. I think getting the job can be doing the job if you get like an animation test, which allows the company to sort of see what you're able to accomplish in roughly the time box that you would get for the normal job.
Yeah.
I think that's part of it. So getting the job, you can show something beautiful. Doing the job, you might be working at a pace that you're not used to. You might be finding yourself not able to keep fiddling around, and you don't get to polish it the way that you normally would. You're learning to accept more limitations. Rig's not what you expect them to be. There's definitely getting it and doing it feel different, but the result, like on paper, the reel might look the same from somebody who took 2 years to do something and somebody who took 2 weeks to do something, depending on their level of skill and how much time it took them to refine it.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably the biggest difference. And then just getting it is different in that as if it's your first job, like maybe you're not expecting exactly how collaborative things can be. Like I think there's a lot of expectations that will sort of be met or shattered, or surprises that you wouldn't expect. That's what's different about doing the job versus getting the job. But yeah, I think those are the biggest things that I could possibly say about it. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, you touched on a lot of what I was thinking, especially with the time. That was something that we talked a lot about when I was a part of a hiring team in a studio that I worked for. Was okay, this is really, really beautiful work, but how long did that person take to do that? Because that is wildly different, and that was something I was really not expecting at my first job, which was Vertex Games working on Civilization 5. And I had been working on acting pieces, and where I went to school, we didn't really do anything with games. Everything was more film based. So with all of that, my entire reel was all film based. And then I had spent the 18 months or so that I was going to this school working on a couple of pieces that were relatively short. I think one was 10 seconds. I think another piece in there was like 5, something along those lines, like just short little things. And I start working for this place, and then I'm like, okay, well, and I have a really long story about how I started working there and how the fact that my greatest moment in animation is still in my first year of animation in the industry. But basically, I remember them giving me my first test, and I was actually doing pre-production on Civ 5. And they said, hey, we want you to animate this scene of this guy saying this thing, and it was in a language I've never worked in before, and we want you to do it in this language. Can you get that to get a block out for us for tomorrow? And like, this was a morning meeting and my first week there, and I was like, you want a block out of this entire animation in a style that I've never done, in a language that I've never done, and you want like a block out for tomorrow? And I was just like, I was dumbfounded. I was like, a block out for tomorrow? I'm used to having like 3 weeks to work on a block out for a 10-second animation. Like, oh my gosh, okay, I got to figure out how to get poses together really fast. And then realizing what they wanted versus what I wanted was also wildly different. So I was used to, okay, I'm going to do an acting scene, and they want to have everything pieced out. And I remember I worked most of the night that night at the studio, and I was putting things in. The guy touched his chest, and then he like kind of ran his hand down his chest a little bit. So I had like all these like dragging moves with the fingers in my blocking, and I had like perfect hip placement and all this kind of stuff for the block out for the next day. I spent so much time, and they looked at it the next day, and they're like, oh yeah, this is great. Okay, change this, this, and this, and then keep going. And then I was like, okay, well, I just spent all this time on this stuff. That's okay, I can do that. But later on, and like as I started seeing other people's work, like their hands were just whatever they were inside of rig. So they were just like, okay, and the next pose is gonna be something like this. The next thing's gonna be something like this. The next one's gonna be like this. And I wasn't used to like, hey, don't put all the detail in yet. Like I was so used to put all the detail in, put all the detail in. And then when I got into actual development, it was like, no, throw out all the garbage that you can get out and show us that stuff as soon as you can, because we're going to throw away half of it and start over anyway. So just give us some rough stuff really quick. Give us ideas on timing, give us ideas on posing, but don't make them perfect yet. I wasn't used to that. That was certainly new to me.
Yeah.
All right, I got a couple questions for you guys now. If you don't mind, what is the difference between film animation and game animation for those who are confused? Because I mean, DreamWorks, Disney, and then you got Blizzard, and Blizzard's in the game, and you're playing the game and the control, and then they have cinematics, and cinematics, I understand how that connects to film, but what would you say are the big differences between film and game?
My spicy answer is nothing. There is no difference.
Mm.
But I mean, the principles, you're still using the principles to do the animation that you need to do. Maybe your rig has more bones in the face, maybe it doesn't. I think the biggest difference between them is just the actual pipeline and who you're communicating with on a daily basis to get your work done. So in film, you will be working, it's more like a movie, like a film, where you're working with a director and you're looking at things. And I think of it as the more thespian side of animation, where you're talking more about the feeling and the mood and the characters, like in the way their face is acting, and do these shots line up, and it definitely feels more like you're making a movie. Like if anybody's ever made a movie at any point, sitting with a director and sitting with your animators, and those are the people that you're associating with, and probably tech art, the people who are making your rigs. But in games, if we're talking about gameplay animation, not cinematic, because cinematic animation is the same as film. But in video game animation, you're communicating more than just what the character's emotions are. You have communicate the gameplay. And so you're working with design and you're working with effects artists who are going to make the cool explosions and stuff with you. You're definitely going back and forth with your tech artist about whatever. Oh, I decided I want to do this. Can you make me this prop? Your modeling team, there's a lot of people that you're in contact with all the time on a regular basis, to the point where every time I've seen a film studio, it's all the animators sitting together, and every time I've seen a game studio, it's all cross-discipline sitting together for the most part. And I'm being general. I haven't worked at a film studio, so anybody who listens to this who might get into film or be in film, full disclosure, I don't necessarily know what I'm talking about, but I do know that when you're communicating, it's not just a punch or something. It's how hard is the punch? Is it a punch that just immediately comes from the chest? Is it a punch that's like big wind up and then you throw it? And possibly making changes on the fly. There's I'm making it sound like one is way more chaotic than the other. It's not. It's just a different group of people that you're interacting with to communicate different ideas with a different purpose.
Got it. What's the difference between good animation and great animation?
I only have one word for that one, but I'll let Lana say that first.
I would just say ideas. I think the ideas are definitely the most important part. I've seen animation that is possibly not the most refined, most polished, perfect arcs on everything, tracking the nose, be like some of the best animation that I love the most because the ideas are so good. Like, oh, it's so interesting the way that character resolved back into their idol, or it's so interesting, like this little, like just character, like the way they chose to move the face, like the mouth in a certain way. Like it just feels more human in a way because I identify more with the ideas than I do with the actual like character or whatever's on screen. Great ideas. Well, I think a reel that has slightly worse animation but incredible ideas, from me, will get my attention more than something with, I've seen all this before. The animation's super polished. Cool. That's my thought. Ideas.
Now I have to change my one-word answer. My one-word answer is between okay animation and great animation was going to just be one-word answer. Is going to be timing. Because
that's my second choice.
Because that would be the basis of everything from which you're animating. It can make or break an animation with a key or two, which is really, really wild. But kind of bouncing also off of what she said, is ideas can be really difficult. And in games, and you asked a little bit about film and game differences. With film, so much of it is storyboarded and so much of your timing is already there. So much of the beats that you have to hit are already there, with either sound department being there or with audio from actors or otherwise. In games, a lot of the times they're like, okay, cool, you need to make a sword attack. Here's maybe some other attacks that are in the game or some ideas that we have that are in other games, but it's usually like, go make a cool sword attack. It's like, okay, what do I want to do that is really going to make this character pop? What's going to be the difference? What is this? And oddly, the only thing I'm thinking of is movies right now and fight scenes. Like back in the day, a knife fight scene was people going like this at each other and going like this at each other with knives and swords. These days, they've taken it to a whole different level. If you watch like John Wick and things those ways, like someone gets their arm blocked and they drop the knife and pick it up with the other hand. And I can remember seeing that for the first time maybe 3 years ago. But when I saw it, I was like, I never thought about dropping a knife and catching it with my other hand, because they like in the middle of it, like I've taken that idea and used it now in games, like obviously slightly different than that, but like the idea behind that was so cool. And if you see a sword attack or something along those lines where they come up with something and you're like, okay, wasn't expecting that. That was crazy. That was cool. Lana hit it on the head right there. That's pretty perfect.
Lana, if you had a choice between somebody with let's imagine you had the choice between somebody whose software skills were a little bit better than their animation, or their animation was a little bit better than their software. Which one's a better pick for you for,
Animation for sure. Did I disappear?
You
There we
did.
go. Weird. Everybody disappeared. And you guys came back and I didn't. Yeah, I would hunt the animation over the software every time. Like one of the big things that I say to people, students all the time who are like really worried about, oh, like I only have Blender because it's free. Like I can't access Maya. Like software is just a tool, the same way that you can draw with a pencil and then later pick up a pen. The actual animation skills and knowing what animation is in your heart, being able to see it and like just intrinsically know the principles down into your bones and how they translate on paper in the computer. Like you can animate with whatever. We can teach you the tool. And chances are you're going to have some kind of proprietary tools to some degree anywhere you work. The tools are, it's good to have a somewhat functional knowledge of them if you want to be in a 3D medium and applying with only 2D artwork. That's pretty tough, but not impossible. I've seen it happen. A girl I went to university with, all 2D animation. Now she's a 3D animator at Pixar. It's crazy. So animation is the most important, for sure. For sure.
Okay, great. All right, so this is just one, I think, more question, and then Dan, if you got any questions, it'd be great. But the next question would be, this is kind of just dear to my heart because I grew up in a time where this wasn't really a job. Like if you chose to be a creative, like your parents said to you, "We'll go get a real job," right? And so you had to prepare for it. And it wasn't until I was in my late 20s, early 30s that this whole creative tech thing really kind of became something where it's like, this is real, right? And one of my neighbors actually was an animator on Final Fantasy. When they were just introducing mocap, they were doing all this traditional animation, they were doing all that kind of stuff, and everything was just blowing up. And this is a great job. But there are people out there who have gone to school for this, who have tried, and who don't have the job, who, are sitting there wondering, do I have the talent? What am I missing? Why am I not getting callbacks? What do we say to those people that, have the desire, but they're just not getting it?
Uh-oh. We may have lost her. She's completely still on my image here.
Yeah, mine too. We'll pause for a second. We'll tell her. Nope, she'll come back.
Oh, yeah, she went completely off. I think I've said her name wrong like 20 times already. I've done it to her face. I've done it constantly. It's so unnatural for me to say her name.
I like the banana reference. That helps.
Yeah. Just making sure she didn't send me a message in another location.
Yeah. Oh, ow. She popped off. Lana Banana.
Lana. Yeah. Internet in her whole building is out. She's going to try and call in with her phone. Oh, technology. Oh, I see her name.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Lana, thank you.
Yeah, apparently all the internet's just out in my building, so I'm very sorry for that. And
Okay.
do a little handheld situation for the time being. I hope that's okay.
Yeah, it's perfect. And thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I know you're just coming off of a day, and so you got other things to do. But thank you. I appreciate
I'm very happy to do it. I'm very sorry about the technical difficulties. I'm just going to try and see if I can prop this up and look professional. Just hold it.
All right,
Sorry,
so
everybody.
yeah, no worries. The question, I don't know how much you heard of it, was, you know, there's students, they've been trying, they're not getting callbacks, they don't know what's wrong, they don't know what they're missing. What do we say, or what do you say to people that are going through that? What do they need to do? How do they need to think about this?
I think one of the things that people sort of lose sight of is sort of in this sort of this similar answer to my last question about film and games. Animation, animation. So people often go in and they struggle because they're trying to animate 3 people or like 50 ninjas in a scene attacking one dude, and they aren't able to find the animation quality they need, often because their attention is so spread between trying to polish animation for like 100 characters or whatever it is. I was inflating how many characters per scene. I've seen a lot. But I think people often underestimate the value of going in and animating like a bouncing ball. I know that I did. Like when I was first starting animation, they were like, we're going to animate a bouncing ball. I was like, let me add the characters. What is going on? This is crazy. I mean, animate a ball, easy, done. But it was done. It wasn't great, let me tell you, because I was rushing through things. And so I think when people aren't really getting it, taking a huge step back and animating the simplest possible thing until you get it right. And then saying, okay, what's next? So maybe it's a bouncing ball, but no squash and stretch. Like if you're having a hard time seeing it, just understand how to get the ball to feel good bouncing. And then after that, add squash and stretch. See what happens. Okay, now you get it like feeling good and squishy, like find the right tensileness. If you squish it a lot, oh, it feels really soft, like it's made of mush. If you don't squish it a lot, it's like, oh, maybe it's like a tennis ball, maybe it's a basketball. Like you can play with animation until you train yourself to see it, and then start working up into more complex subjects. Even before animating like a full character, there's the people have seen like ball with legs rig. I would say try to take a character and just animate an arm realistically dropping. Just drop an arm. Ow. Sorry. Too realistic. Like the learning that you're able to take from even small exercises like that are things that like the moral of those stories still apply to bigger, more complex animations. Like if I parent a ball to my root control in a run cycle, it's a bouncing ball. It just is. There's so many things that rely on the knowledge you learn in those early exercises. And so if you're not getting it, just don't rush yourself. There's not pressure to get it right first. That's why you're studying. That's the beauty of learning is letting yourself learn. And so let yourself do that, I think would be my message to people.
I love that. That's nice, because I think people can get overwhelmed and they're like, I gotta learn this, I gotta learn this. I see it in game arts. I gotta learn Substance, I gotta learn Marvelous, I gotta learn all this stuff. And yeah, I mean, there's some truth to it, but you gotta be able to create work.
Mm-hmm.
The software is just the tool.
Yeah.
That's great.
I think,
Dan, you want to add?
I was just going to add a little bit to that. I think another part for me is making sure you get your animation in front of as many people as you can. Like if you happen to have friends already in the industry, be like, hey man, can you take a look at this? But I do it today still. Like when I'm getting ready to put out a reel, I find some of my favorite friends that I relied on in the past on looking at my reels. And I send it out to them like, hey, before I send this out to, let's say, Blizzard, what do you think of this reel? And they'll say like, hey man, shot 5, it's pretty weak. It's bringing down every shot around it. I would just cut it. And it can be really hard to hear that sometimes, because shot 5 might have been my favorite. But if like 3 people look at it and they're like, shot 5 is a little weak, or it's boring, or it's breaking your tempo, or whatever else, getting it in front of as many people as you can before you actually send it out is important. And then even if people don't know animation, my wife doesn't know anything about animation. I could say timing, she doesn't know what that word means. But I show her my work. Like, hey, what did you like? What didn't you like? Just getting it in front of as many people as you can is, I think, super important. And I think that it can be extremely helpful in ways that you would not understand, you wouldn't know until you had people look at it. Like, this run just doesn't feel right. There's something not, I don't know what it is. Something's not right with that run. And then you can at least go look at that. Did we lose her again?
No, she's just going on to the
Oh,
her internet.
Okay.
I was trying to go back to the
Computer.
yeah, but now that camera's not working. So we're just gonna stay here. It's fine.
All right. Well, that's good, because I got only one more thing. I know I said I was almost done, but what do you guys love about this job? Like, what do you love about animation?
For me, I love animation. I always said that it was like a marriage between my love of playing on the computer and my love of acting. My parents met on stage. They were both actor and actress for Windsor Light Opera for years. And so being able to act, but like I'm not the actor, sort of creates even a more versatile portfolio than I ever could have as an actress out there in the world somewhere. I can be one day like a sexy babe, and the next day I could be like a stoic military general, and then I could be a muscly bro, like whatever. Like I could do anything. I could do it all. It's great. Monsters, like I could be a dragon. That sounds very sort of fantastical and silly, but I do like exploring the different headspace of different characters that way. But I think the thing I like the most about game development specifically is there's sort of like a puzzle piece, like a puzzle feeling to it. While I like putting together all the pieces and not just doing the acting. Like, as much as I love that part of it, I like working with all the different disciplines to make something feel right. I like working with design to say, your ability is pretty cool, but if you actually gave it like 0.25 seconds more on this cast time, I could make this animation this much more cool. And like the experience of relating to my coworkers in this way, finding unique ways to implement things in the engine. I feel like a lot of different parts of my brain are firing in a way that makes me feel very satisfied with the work I do and feel so much ownership over the things that I create. I love it.
No, that's great. It's great. Dan, you got something?
For me, growing up, I absolutely loved video games. From Atari, which dates me a little bit, but from Atari on, I've been in front of a console or in front of a big box or in front of a computer playing games. Like, as soon as I could, I started getting into it. And I'm an introverted quite a bit. So for me, games means a lot to me personally. If I'm having a really bad day, mentally speaking, I know the first thing I'm going to do is, on my way home, I'm going to call my wife and I'm going to tell her, listen, I need a video game night. Is that okay? Or do you want to play video games with me? Because for me, it helps me zone out. It helps me clear my head out of what I've been doing through the day. I enjoy looking at it because it's beautiful in one way or another. And I like the idea of creating something that's going to do that for somebody else. Like, you hear about people talking about just one more turn when it comes to stuff like Civilization, because they're sitting there and they don't want to get up from it, and they're enjoying it that much, and it's taking them out of what they need to be taken out of at the moment to enjoy this fake world, essentially. I know what video games mean to me, and I'm hoping that people that play the games I work on have that same feeling on what they mean to them, and I like the idea that I'm a part of doing that for them.
You remember when Scott first met you, what he said about Civilization, right? He was like, was it Empire? He was, my brother, who's a COO here, when he first met Dan, he was like, "You did that with the faces? I remember those faces. Like that was the first time they were so realistic." He was so like he just geeked out. So it was quite funny.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to thank you both for taking the time and being here. I know it's late for you, Dan, and after work for you, Lena. And so thank you so much.
Hey, no problem. Thank you so much for inviting me. It was my pleasure to be here.
It's so good to see you.
So good to see you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Take care. Have a good night, everybody. And, if you want to learn more about us, head over to vertexschool.com. If you want to learn more about Lena, where do they find out more about you?
Oh, you can find more about me on Twitter is probably the best way. I'm at Latieni. It's Latienie. I also have a website that is lanabachynski.com where I sell long-form realistic charcoal renderings if you're interested in those. And otherwise, that's about it. Yeah.
All right. Awesome. All right. Take care. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right. So I want to thank you so much for being here and taking the time to listen to this podcast. And I want to ask a couple of things from you. Number one, make sure you leave a comment or you rate this on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever that you're listening to this. It really makes a big difference in helping us get the word out and to help people understand what we do. The other thing is, I want to make sure that you know where to find us. Head over to www.vertexschool.com to learn about all the programs that we have for creatives. Our job at Vertex School is to teach you new skills in creative tech and help you get a job that matters to you. We lock in on the specific skills and triggers that people are looking for in the industry and what you need to do to prove that you can do this job. We're taking applications right now, so make sure that you head over to www.vertexschool.com and apply today. All right, again, thank you so much for being here. Have an amazing day.